Hi, my name is Sadaf, and I'm the co-founder of CodeSchool. Welcome to Tech Talk Tuesdays. The idea is to speak to tech leaders from around the world and understand from a non-tech perspective how the lives of either yourselves or the lives of your children will be impacted by the work being done today. I am super excited to welcome our first guest, Ms. Farah Ali. She needs no introduction. She's doing a million fantastic things in the tech space and outside in the US and in Pakistan. So Farah, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
My name is Farah Ali. I grew up in Karachi and I did my schooling in Pakistan. I am currently running my own company. I'm a co-founder and chief technology officer at FreightWeb. It's a logistics tech startup that I started last year after getting VC funding. Prior to that, I was at Microsoft for most of my career early on, and I was there as a software engineer, grew into leadership, moved to eBay, did stuff around e-commerce, did stuff around shipping science, infrastructure, moved from there to gaming, so moved to Electronic Arts, where I worked on pretty much every game that EA ships, so FIFA, Madden, Battlefield, Battlefront. And then last year I decided to quit and join or start my own company. I do have a lot of passion around diversity and inclusion, so I started Pakistani Women in Computing. It's a community-based organization. It's been there for about 2 years now, and the goal is just to have a platform for an affinity group that doesn't have to explain themselves. They just belong, and they're there to connect, they're there to network and learn and grow together. I also run a nonprofit called One Good Act, which is purely needs-based, poverty alleviation platform. I work on things around vocational training. I partner very closely with an organization, a small grassroots nonprofit in Karachi called Al Zora Welfare Organization. And I work around the US for homeless and hurricane relief and emergency relief efforts. So those are kind of, just passion projects that intersect with, how I can use technology to help people.
For a lot of parents have asked us here at CodeSchool, what is programming? And so how would you explain this to a parent who has a young child who's not doing coding, what it is and what it is?
As a parent, I would explain to another parent that, you want to equip your child, if you want them to learn to swim because they need to know how to protect themselves, even if you don't want them to be an Olympic swimmer, it's some basic life skills. So to me, coding is almost like a life skill. It's how do you navigate the future. I liken coding to, if let's say you move to another country, you move to China, and nobody speaks the language you speak. And in order to get around, to shop, to just do basic stuff, you need to know the language, right? You need to know the basics of getting around. And so for me, coding is like navigating the world of today, the world of tomorrow. Computers are not just, this device that we're using to talk to each other. Computing is everywhere, right? Embedded devices are all around us, is Alexa, most of our, how we commute, how we talk, how we shop, everything is connected. Everything is using computing as the power. And so if our children don't learn how to talk in the language of computers, if they don't understand how to program computers, it's going to be, I would say mandatory for them, a mandatory skill for them going forwards. Whatever they do in their career, I think that's going to be a baseline. Computing journey started with games. I had a PC at my home pretty early on compared to, I think, a lot of my peers. And I would play a lot of games, a lot of adventure games to start with. There was a whole series of, King's Quest and Police Quest and Space Quest and all the quests. And it was also a way for me and my brother to connect and something we would do, when we were done with homework or after school. So I think gaming was the way for me to get excited about computers. Computers wasn't a scary thing. It was a very familiar friend. I think that easing into computers early on was very helpful because I wasn't intimidated by college stuff that I hadn't learned because I was very familiar with computers.
What would you tell kids or other adults that are non-coders that are scared to kind of get into this, down this coding path or learn a coding skill, what would you want to tell them?
It's, there's nothing scary because coding is very logical. It's all about logic. It's all about strategy and critical thinking. So think of it as, you're going to do math or physics and you're going to get very academic knowledge that, you will know a lot about a topic, or you will know how integration works, or you know how certain formulas work. But with computers, you can actually use a lot of the skills you use for computation or strategy, or a lot of your knowledge or creativity into making something. So it's a very sort of, gratifying experience, because you have a start and then you have an end. You can actually see the product of the work that you've done. So I think that's very, very useful, because it's not just theoretical learning, it's a hands-on learning. And I think children and human beings, we learn from doing, from creating. So I think it definitely makes your mind work very differently, and you're able to think much more logically, think much more critically.
So, what problems do you see, or what big problems do you see on the horizon that you think this space, whether it's coding, programming, tech in general, that it can solve?
I mean, I would say, what problem today point to that doesn't really have a technology solve? I think there are very few, right? Even when you look in medical science and breakthroughs, when you look at vaccines, like we're going through this pandemic and coronavirus, if you look at the details of how they're, discovering what equipment is used in the lab, how they're actually measuring and doing analysis, pretty much all through the, right? Tons and tons of data. You've got these trials. How are you evaluating and analyzing? How are you looking at the effectiveness of a certain trial versus another? So I think it's just, like I said, core for any industry, right? If you look at my experience, I was in developer tools, I was in search, I was in e-commerce, I was in infrastructure, I was in gaming, now I'm in logistics. Very different domains, right? Trucking has nothing to do with search, has nothing to do with shopping online. Yet my experience is all in technology and software engineering. And that's the core, common core. So, I think, the world of today and the world of tomorrow is going to be even more advanced, and technology is what is powering it.
Why is software or development or the field that you're in, like, why is it great?
I mean, I think, so a little bit of that is going to be my own opinion, right? I think for me, I think it's great because it's an equalizer, right? It's a very democratic subject, it doesn't matter, like I was schooled in Pakistan, didn't go to like Ivy League universities, and yet, when I started in Microsoft, I had people who graduated from Stanford and Yale, and then somebody who didn't even have a CS, but just had the passion and the knowledge for computing. So I think that in that way, I think it's pretty awesome, because it really is about you and your skills, right? I also think that it's a discipline in which you're forever learning. So it's almost like you keep learning continuously. It keeps your mind sharp, right? It's something that, the same language, like we were taught C++. I mean, I remember I did a project in like Fox Pro. And there was a project in Cold Fusion, basic, those languages nobody uses, right? But that doesn't mean that, coding isn't done, or, so it's like you have to keep up with the times. Machine learning wasn't a topic or a subject that we learned in college, you and I, but it's something that I learned on my own and on the job. So it's just one of those other things that it keeps you smart, I think. And I think it's another discipline where, there are no geographical boundaries, don't matter as much. So you're talking a lot about remote work and working from home. I think for people in this field, the impact hasn't been huge for them, right? They're used to sort of everything they need is in a box, and they don't really need, they're almost used to a lot of these remote interactions. So there hasn't been a lot of interruption in that field, for people who are working in technology. So I think for all of these reasons, I mean, just if you're looking at, people who are unable to leave their homes, or they're not very mobile, they can have fantastic careers. They can be earning very well. They can have financial independence while being at home. So just from from that perspective, I think it's a really great equalizer. I think the last thing I would say for me, like, I just, I think I've always had a passion for technology. So for me, it's it's one of those things where, you know, I can't think of, you know, a better career path for myself, you know. And I think it's amazing that I can have a career in something that I like, but I don't have to stagnate, and I can keep applying the same basic skills, but I have to keep learning, and I can kind of go and evolve in these areas. So, you know, those days of, you know, you stay in the same career and then you retire, those days are gone, right? And so this is something that I think is fantastic, because it keeps you ready. Like, you don't have to upskill yourself. I think you just have to grow your tool belt, per se.
We're at the end of our roster of questions, and we do have a couple of minutes left. So I just wanted to give you the platform to maybe plug PWIC, just because, you know, this whole piece around women in computing, like that it didn't exist when we were starting out, right? And so for me, I went down a very different path because I didn't see a future. I didn't identify with the industry, and it was so nascent in Pakistan, and I stayed back here. So I ended up going down, you know, the corporate route and going into the corporate sector. So you know, I think it's such an important platform that you've made. So you know, if there's anything that you would want to plug or share, please do that.
Yeah, I mean, like I talked about, you know, I said, you know, diversity and inclusion matters to me. A big part of it is because, you know, I think college, while I, you know, that's kind of where I discovered that, oh, this is a good career path for me, I like this. It was also a very demotivating experience. I didn't get the sort of support system that I wanted. I didn't have people sort of in front of me that I could look to and be like, oh, I can see this as a future career path for myself. Teachers, unfortunately, weren't very supportive. There wasn't a community. I couldn't go online. We have fantastic resources these days. Everything, there's a video for everything. There's a free class for everything. None of this existed. And so, and then the other piece was there were so many stereotypes around, you know, what a coder is. It's this loner person who doesn't shower, doesn't have friends, has no social skills, is usually a man, right? And so it was also like this sort of unspoken stigma or stereotype that kept women away from this, especially in Pakistan. And so I think that, you know, as I kind of grew more senior in this career, I started seeing more women around me. And regardless of where we were from, what our backstory was, a lot of us had very similar experiences. You know, from the most liberal family to the most conservative family, we all shared this common, you know, how we had to fight certain obstacles and certain barriers to, you know, push for ourselves in this career. You know, and then now that we look back, we want to say, okay, how do we help others who are in this situation, you know, navigate that path? So one thing, for example, that I do as part of Pakistani Women in Computing, I do get the chance to talk to a lot of kids, a lot of college kids. There was this conference recently in Habib University, and I was talking to, you know, the women there, a lot of, you know, graduating class, or, you know, the senior class, and they were asking, you know, how do we make sure that we can pursue a career here, you know, or how, you know, there are night shifts, or how do we convince our parents not to get us married, you know, after graduation, because that's a very real problem, right? And so we were just sort of like brainstorming, like, here's how you convince your parents, right? Here's why financial independence is important, because you cannot depend on knowing what's there, right? So yeah, so I think just knowing that there's someone there that you can go to, you can ask questions in a safe space, that there's no question is too weird, or there's no such thing as a stupid question, for example, right? That's very important. I think, you know, I think you and I didn't have that. And a lot of the times when we asked what we were, you know, stupid questions, we were shot down and berated. And so, and that, you know, kind of pushes a person away from what there could have been a natural path, right? And so I certainly think that had you been in a different environment, you'd probably, you know, because I think you really liked, you were really into coding and you were really good at it. So you probably would have pursued a different path if you had more, not just mentors, but sponsors, people who are actively pushing you forward, people who are actively championing you. So this is all about, you know, a feel-good community where people are championing you. They're, you know, the smallest thing you do, you make a big deal of it because it's important. And guiding people, mentoring people, helping them see what a career could look like, and helping them see that there's no one path, right? Like, you can be a mom of two, you can have your, you know, you can have that life and you can do this. There are, you know, women who don't choose to get married. There are women who choose to, you know, get married later in life. We have every spectrum across, you know, in the community. And I think that's very important to see too. There's no one type. and that there's no one, lifestyle that this profession is for. So yeah, so I think, it's very important to have community. And I think what you're doing is great because you're starting that young, you're starting that very early. And what that will do is when both boys and girls go to college, usually when you're going to that first CS 101 class, most of the boys have already done coding before. Most of the boys, that's not their first experience. And then most of the girls are doing it for the first time. And that's when you sort of experience this, is something wrong with me? Am I dumb? Do I not understand this? Versus, well, this is the first time you're, getting exposed to it. So obviously it's going to take time. This person has done 2 years of coding before, which you don't know, right? And so when there's a sort of level playing field, it's going to help them with their confidence. It's going to help them with, when they're going to have those tougher curriculum in colleges, they're not going to feel like, there's something innately different about this field that only boys can do better, because that's another stereotype, right? Like math and computer science is something that's for boys. I'm really hoping that that's the other thing that you see with the community is you see a lot of these fantastic women doing all kinds of amazing things around the world, and it should make it very obvious that this is not a gender-specific profession.
So great, that's it. Thank you so much, Farah. I really appreciate your
Thanks
time.
and good luck.